This week, veteran British newsman Jon Snow shocks the world with this video about his experiences covering the conflict in Gaza. We'll honour comic genius Robin Williams as we look at some of the ads that he made over the years, and a big new campaign from a global clothing brand. Leading the brand communications debate, this is Mags on Media. We'll start with this. British news anchor Jon Snow has made an emotional plea for an end to the violence that has led to deaths and maiming of scores of children in Gaza. The Channel 4 news presenter made the video campaign after returning back to the United Kingdom from the Strip, where he visited the Shifa Hospital. In the video on YouTube, he says he can't get the images out of his mind, adding that society cannot let it go on. Snow says if reporting is worth anything, if there is a preparedness to listen and watch and read, then together a difference can be made. The video has again raised the debate about impartiality in reporting.
I'm back, and in the comfort of this studio, it's hard to imagine I was ever away. I don't need to imagine, though, because what I saw is still etched in my mind. What I never knew is what I know now, which is that those people who live in Gaza are mainly, but unbelievably young. The average age is 17. That means that about 250,000 are under 10. And you know, if you know any 10-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, the idea in the looseness of a war zone that you can control your children, that they won't be somewhere where they can be hit, is, you know, beyond any kind of imagination. You can't hope to control that. So that in a very densely packed urban area, if you decide to throw missiles, shells and the rest, then undoubtedly you will kill children. And that is what they're doing. There was one specific moment that stood out above all others, and that was penetrating the 3rd floor of the Shifa Hospital, one of 2 floors dedicated to children. That's where I met Maha, terribly crippled by shrapnel that had penetrated her spine. That's where I saw this little 2.5-year-old with panda-sized, huge, suppurating, round, panda-like wounds that almost prevented her eyes opening at all. They were the consequence of a broken skull and a fractured nose. I can't get those images out of my mind. I don't think you can either, because they've been everywhere. They are the essence of what is happening in Gaza. Now, of course, Hamas, for its part, was throwing rockets into Israel, designed, ideally, as they would put it, to kill Israelis. But of course, Israel, courtesy of American finance, has invented the most brilliant shield, which is keeping absolutely everything out. And that's a big difference. The suffering is amongst the ground troops, mainly 20-year-olds, who go in and get killed. So when I last spoke to the Norwegian doctor who is one of those dealing with the consequences of this bombing, I asked him how many children have been wounded. They've registered 1,310. How many children dead? 166. But that number is growing all the time. That is what makes this something that every one of us has to confront. We have to know that in some way we actually share some responsibility for those deaths. Because for us, it is no priority whatever to stop it. Our United Nations, our government, our world is not that interested. The fact that you're watching this, that you've chosen to watch it, means that you're actually motivated to do something. And that, in the end, is the greatest hope the people in Gaza have. We cannot let it go on. If our reporting is worth anything, if your preparedness to listen and watch and read is anything to go by, together we can make a difference.
So here's the question. Has Snow crossed the line of impartiality in reporting or raised a critical debate in journalism on the issue? Here now is Professor Anton Harber, who heads the School of Journalism at Wits University here in Johannesburg. Anton, welcome to you. When is a journalist allowed to take a stand?
You know, there's a time and a place, I think, when it's most effective for a journalist to show their emotions, their personal responses to a particularly moving story. I think it's for the exceptional case, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that Jon Snow's gushy sentimentalism is helpful here. You know, the Gaza story does raise a lot of emotions, but I think the real issue we have at the moment is that both sides are throwing around so much propaganda. There's so much stuff flying around on social media in particular that what we really need is media taking sober assessments, trying to cut back on the emotion, trying to show we've verified and we've cut through all that stuff and are trying to get to the truth or to assist you to get to the truth. More than anything else at the moment, we need journalists to focus on balance, impartiality, the pursuit of truth. That's not to say that there aren't times.
Well, let's talk about that. Response to atrocity. I think it's the editor of The Spectator who writes this week that perhaps reporters should show more emotion when reporting, saying that screaming is a rational response. Perhaps in this case, that's what Jon Snow was doing.
I think some of the great moments on television are when you saw people on camera responding to 9/11 or to the death of Kennedy, and you saw it and it was most effective. So I don't think you have to pretend to be inhuman. But I think that there are cases when you want to show that you're making a sober assessment, you're trying to cut through an emotional situation. So it has its place, but I think one has to think carefully about what that place is.
In modern media, has that line of impartiality moved?
Oh, definitely. Traditionally, you know, your BBC man couldn't show any emotion at all and would be fired at even the hint of him of having a point of view or a response to anything. So yes, I think there's now growing acceptance that in the right time, in the right place, in the right way, it has its place.
Given that he did it on YouTube and not on his newscast itself, is that relevant? Are there different rules?
I think so. It's more relaxed. I think that different rules generally do apply. But I think broadly speaking, from a character like Snow, who is a voice of global journalistic authority, I think that in this case, most of what we need is sober, careful, balanced assessment in a situation where emotions are not helping deal with the situation.
So if he is that voice of authority, is the call going to make any difference at all, or is it simply an interesting theoretical debate that the likes of you and I can have?
I think it's an interesting point, and I think it's good for us and the public to speak about what we expect of our journalists and figures like Snow. So I think it's a valid point of discussion. And one would want to hear from the audience as well as to how they feel, what they want in situations like this.
What about, again, to your point about alienation, the Jewish community in Britain would not have responded positively to sentiments like this. Would that have impacted on the Channel 4 brand itself, or does it have the potential to do so?
I think it does, and that's one of the reasons I think there's a time and a place. But in a particularly contested, emotive situation, I think you have to strive for as much balance and impartiality as you can within the limitations of what's real. So yes, you have to be concerned that your role here is to either alienate both sides or alienate neither side. But not one side over another.
Is this one man's anger, or has he set some sort of new precedent in journalism?
I don't think it's a new precedent. I think there's been cases in the past, sometimes very effective, when a journalist has said, look, you need to know what I feel. I can't stay silent on this. I want you to know what I feel. And here's my first-hand point of view, and it can be very powerful and very effective at the right time.
And how would this play in South Africa? Could an older news presenter, either on radio or television, make the same type of call? And if so, what kind of response do you think they would get?
I think a lot depends on what station you're on and the style of that station. I think a public broadcaster is different from a commercial broadcaster. The public broadcaster here, I think more than anything else, we want them to show we're filtering, we're editing, we're balanced, we're impartial. So I think you would be stricter there. On commercial stations, you may have a more relaxed building on the personalities of presenters where there may be more space for it.
Again, as long as it doesn't degenerate into a Fox-style haranguing, which is also very dangerous. And that's the other side of the spectrum, isn't it?
Exactly. Where it becomes totally partial, it's really not helpful to the political debate much at all.
Anton Harber, thank you. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the story on Facebook and on Twitter. Coming up on the programme, micro jobs that equal some extra cash, and a look at the late Robin Williams' contribution to advertising.
News that moves. ENCA.com.